Welcome, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are joining from. I'm Avinash Bansal, co founder of Tomo Club, and this is our session two of the book Leaders of Tomorrow book tour. Many of you were with us on May 1 launch. Some of you joined last week for the ambassador program, and today we are here to discuss the most human dimension of school leadership, building people and building culture. Quick housekeeping before we start. The session has been recorded and you'll get the link tomorrow. I think it will be live at the same time. So drop your questions in the chat anytime and we'll get to them at the second half. So let me introduce our four leaders today. Chris Shearer, he's a principal of John Creek High School in Georgia. Dr. Keisha Scarlett, she's the founder of Rubicent and superintendent in residence at the University of Washington. Dr. Leslie Sparcello, she's a superintendent at Cedars International Academy in Austin, Texas. And Dr. David Verdugo, he's a superintendent of Santa Cruz Valley Unified in Arizona and 2026 Arizona Superintendent of the Year. Welcome, everyone. So, okay, here's what bind these four chapters together in the book. Every district in this country is dealing with the same problem right now: not enough quality teachers, leaders who are burning out, and a culture that erodes faster than it builds. The convention answer has always been to recruit harder, but to go look somewhere else. The four leaders on this panel do not believe that. They each asked different question, and what if the people we already need are inside the school system? What if our systems are designed to make them invisible? So that's what we're going to discuss today. Our four authors have contributed immensely to this book. Chris, I would, there's some lines that I remember. For Chris, resilience is not a trait, it's a rhythm. He mentioned that. I love it. Keisha, you said in one of your chapters that the pipeline isn't empty. It's a school system that designed to make the talent invisible. For Dr. Leslie, the worst professional experience is not being coached out, it's been quietly tolerated. And Dr. David, I love this line. When a student walks across the stage of graduation, who have they become? So, four different chapters, one argument, and I would say let's get into it. So, welcome everyone. I would love if you guys can also introduce yourself quickly and we'll take it from there. Chris, you want to go first?
Sure. As Avinash said, I'm Chris Shear. I'm principal at Johns Creek High School in North Metro Atlanta, Georgia. Great to be here. Happy to be here and excited for the conversation today.
Dr. Leslie.
Hi, I'm Dr. Leslie Sparcello. I am superintendent at Cedars International in Austin, Texas. This is my 36th year as an educator. I love this topic. I'm very passionate about teachers and growing teachers. So thank you so much for the opportunity.
Perfect. Dr. Leslie, Dr. Keisha.
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. I'm Dr. Keisha Scarlett. I'm a former superintendent, and now I'm the CEO of my own consulting group. And even though I don't work day to day in K-12 schools, I still support schools through a variety of different areas connected to talent. And so I'm just so excited to hear from my the co-writers and co-authors in this book and be able to learn from them today. So thank you.
Thank you so much. David.
Good morning. I'm David Verdugo, the superintendent of Santa Cruz Valley, District 35, which is in southern Arizona. We're about 15 miles from the Mexican border. And it's nice to hear that somebody's been in education longer than I have. This is year 35 for me. So I've been doing this for quite a while. And I do look forward to hearing from the others.
Perfect. So the whole idea of this book tour is that people can get a little sneak peek into what you wrote, so that can get motivated more to go and check out the book. It's live. It's available for free on tomoclub.org/leaders of tomorrow. So we'll get into a discussion round. So round one is about the origin. So my first question is to Keisha. So Keisha, I want to start with you because your chapter opens one of the most striking moments in this entire book. I will read this out. It's late August 2012. You are standing at the back of South Shore PK to 8 gym in Seattle. There are nearly 250 new teacher recruits in front of you, settling in for the orientation. You are the principal of the school who's hosting it, and you scan the room slowly, and you realize that there is not a single African American teacher among the new recruits. When you raised it with your district, the answer came back fast that there just weren't enough applicants of color. And you wrote that the answer stopped you cold. So walk us through that moment, Keisha. What did you see standing there the district couldn't see?
Yeah, so thank you so much. And thank you for this opportunity, Avinash. We're all so grateful. So, in that moment, I remember very vividly looking in the gym and seeing all of these people and not seeing any representation, but knowing that I was an African American woman, second generation, working in Seattle schools. My mother retired from Seattle schools and serving a population that was 90% children of color. And so what I saw was talent everywhere, even just outside that gym and outside of Southeast Seattle, where I live and where I've led my entire career pretty much. People were holding schools together every day. I saw instructional assistants, family support workers, community partners. Um, they all knew our students, they knew our neighborhoods. Many of them had grown up in those same sort of zip codes and in the same area. But while they weren't credentialed, they were already doing the work. So I was thinking that the district was counting like applications of people who were applying for these opportunities and maybe even self-tapping or having people who sponsored them into those opportunities. But I was really looking at community and what were the barriers that were keeping people from the community from making that next step into service as as a certificated or certified, educator. So when they said there aren't many applicants of color, they were describing what I believe is a recruitment failure and calling it a talent shortage. The talent was never missing. The pathway was missing. And I knew this because I had been one of those people. I grew up in that community. I came back to teach. I came back to lead. In some ways, the pathway was laid before me because my mother, was a teacher as well. But no one really designed that pathway for me. I had people who saw what my talents were, and they projected them back to me, and kind of put it in my mind around what I could offer and what I could give in service. And that's how I found my way through it with a strong mentorship. And not just mentorship, but also sponsorship. People who sponsored me into spaces and called my name out in the spaces that I was not even in. And I'm deeply appreciative of that. And I believe that all youth and adults need that to support their talent development throughout their life, to have people that accompany them on the way. And so the idea never changed for me over the years. I just think the strategy did.
No, I love that. And in my opinion, it took you 9 years, but you still kept on fighting for that movement to finally come up with that, your initiative, I think, ARE. Do you say it R or do you say just
Well, I
ARE?
think some people call it R, Academy for Rising Educators, so ARE. But yeah, I hear it both ways. Yeah.
No, it was definitely inspiring that how it was like a little roller coaster that you thought about doing something, you could not achieve it, but you kept the fire alive, and then finally you could, and it happened like 3 to 4 times, that you brought it up and then it got shot down and then you again brought it up. So that was quite a good read there.
Yeah. But institutional readiness, early on, I was really trying to convince one institution at a time. Our local university, University of Washington, they couldn't house it. They didn't have an undergraduate education program. Then another local university, a smaller private university, they wanted it, but the timing wasn't right for me. So every door I knocked on had a structural reason why I couldn't open it. But what shifted and changed was I stopped knocking, I would say, on single doors and started building a coalition. So I just started socializing the idea with people about a teaching program. So by the time we launched, 3 institutions had really restructured something to make it work. And I finally asked the right person. with the right institutional authority and a genuine appetite to do it. So a number of organizations later, some failed starts and stops over a number of years. And so I would say the big lesson for me in that is that, good ideas don't die from a lack of merit. They usually die from infrastructure. And so I had to build the infrastructure for the idea to really find its home with Seattle Central College. And now all the way to the University of Washington. My daughter graduated with her master's degree. She was in the first cohort and she finished 6 years of the program and finished in 2025 with her master's degree. And she's a second grade teacher. And my younger daughter has done the undergraduate portion and she's a first grade teacher. Yeah.
Wow. Fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing that
Thank
part. For people to deep dive into it, they can definitely read Keisha's chapter, Hidden in Plain Sight. Over to you now, Chris. I will quote you. So, Chris, you wrote what I would call a masterclass on building teams. You named the 9 principles, but the one that really stopped me when I read it was the third one. You call it by leading by imperfect example. And that's a hard sell in a system that rewards leaders for having answers, for being the one who is certain, because people look at uncertainty or imperfection as a weakness. So tell us about what you actually look like. How does it look like in practice? And is there a moment when leading imperfectly cost you something before it paid off?
Yeah, and you're right. I mean, as a leader, as a high school principal, I'm supposed to be, perfect or 100% or have all the answers, and I've never been one as an assistant principal, teacher, or principal to voice that or really believe that. I mean, the school I run, very affluent, very high performing. A lot of pressure, but I mean, 1,700 students, 3,400 parents, 160 staff members, like it's a big community. And I can't be all things to all people. And I certainly can't be perfect in all that I do. I'm committed to doing the best job I can do every single day, and to serve kids ultimately to my best abilities every single day. But I'm going to make mistakes. I'm going to trip, I'm going to fall. And every Monday when I meet with my admin team and we're talking about the week, we're looking backward, we're looking forward, there is that time of thinking out loud, of reflecting. And really the first thing I'm looking at is where were the missteps and what happened previously? What can we do differently? What can I do differently to be better next time? And it's not that I wasn't good, but there's always room for growth. I can always be better, in everything that I do. And I think when I model that, I give my team, the permission structure, as it were, to go out there and be the best they can be, to really put themselves forward, knowing that it's okay if they make a mistake, because we're going to pick up the pieces and move forward anyway. So it's been, a great journey, and love building leaders and helping them and empowering them to do their work. And I think the best way, at least that I found to do that, is to fail forward, is to be an imperfect example, so that they feel comfortable, really going the extra mile, because they don't have to be perfect, and they don't have to, think that they've got all the answers all the time. In terms of, has that cost me? I mean, I certainly sometimes have, critical conversations with my supervisors, with that kind of mindset, and maybe not asking enough questions, not being cautious enough before I go, and things of that nature. So I think that's kind of the bump in the road, as it were, or the fork that sometimes can occur, because I'm more or less, I'm going to hear people, I'm going to ask some questions, but I'm like, let's go, we don't know what's going to happen until we execute. Let's execute and see what happens. I mean, we're in a great school, great community. We're going to be okay, but there's always room, to challenge the status quo and do differently, to take the school even further than it's been, even though some people think there may be no more, we can't go any further, which is never true.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's easier to say and harder to follow, for sure. Is to live by with this ideology. over to you, Leslie. So your chapter title alone is the bravest in this book. Help them grow, I'll help them, like a tongue twister also. But the line that stayed wasn't the title. It was this line that work professional experience for a teacher is not being coached out, it's been quietly tolerated. And that sentence most leaders avoid saying out loud. Uh, so take us into that. What does quietly tolerated actually do to a school culture? And when did you first realize that monitoring teacher is not the same thing as developing them?
Sure. So, quietly tolerated, I think, we're very busy. I can really relate to Chris. Being a campus principal is the hardest job in education. It is so busy. But their main role is to make sure that there's a quality teacher in the classroom. And sometimes those operational things or the fires that you put out every day keep you from dealing with a situation with the teacher in the classroom that's not the highest quality, but they're there. You have a warm body, the kids are being safe and taken care of. So I see Chris smiling. So you go with it, right? But that's not good for anybody. It's not good for the students for sure. And it's not good for the person that is there because nobody wants to be average and definitely nobody wants to be bad. So even when you have a teacher in there that's not of the highest quality, that is not their desire. That's not what they want to be. But it's a team effort. Like you can't just give them directives, I find. And I'm experiencing this right now with my own elementary team that, in fact, I just got an email this morning right before this session with one of my people finally asking me like, okay, what does a good growth plan look like? Because I think people think a growth plan is, I'm going to give you a list of directives. You need to read this book. You need to go to this workshop. You need to show up on time. I'm going to document all the things you do. And it's this long list of documentation, but that doesn't help somebody grow. And, to Dr. Keisha's point, like they're right there in front of us. There are good people with us already. And why are we going to go out and do the very expensive and time consuming effort of looking for somebody when we have somebody right in front of us that we could actually grow? And especially if it's somebody like who's been with you and they have committed to you in time. I have a current teacher right now that I've let him know that I'm neither terminating him nor am I offering him a contract for next year. We are in the process right now of helping him grow. But that is taking me, that is taking my SPED director. Everybody has to be a part of it. It is not just on the teacher. We have to be boots on the ground, fully committed. I say if the teacher is on a growth plan, I'm also on a growth plan. And if there is an administrator who does not believe that you're both on a growth plan, then you're not going to get the success that you need. And nobody wants to just know that they're the weakest link, right? Everybody wants to be successful. And we talk a lot about recruitment, but I think we should be talking a little bit more about growth and retention. You have people there, keep people. Every time you change people, then you take a step backwards because they have to learn your systems. They have to learn your kids. They have to learn your culture. And if you have somebody who's already there but struggling, then grow them. I am all about, someone commented after we posted, Dr. Leslie, I hope I can, get you a different perspective, like teachers are good and whatever. And please understand, I don't need a new perspective. I love teachers and I love growing them. I don't want anybody to go. If you have chosen us, then we choose you and we want to grow you. So I was somewhere mid-career when I started to realize I was an academic dean at a high school that had 3,500 kids and over 200 teachers. And so there was a lot of growth to happen. And I started to realize that when I was committed to the growth plan and I was active, that teacher grew. And when I was just documenting, I was terminating someone. And once I started to see that trend, I realized that I just had to stay committed.
Yeah. So is it like when you say that, do you give them like constant feedback before, like there are like 3 strikes, 5 strikes? Like what is your thought process behind that part?
Yeah, and I don't like to think of it in the negative in terms of strikes. What I like to think of is, well, I believe in the calendar. Like
Mm.
you calendar things out. I believe in having what I call rocks. Like these are the things that no matter what happens, this will happen. So if I say this is a teacher I'm growing, and I put it on my calendar that we're meeting every Tuesday at 10 o'clock, then come hell or high water, we are meeting every Tuesday at 10 o'clock so that I can give them that regular feedback so that I can, because my goal is to help them grow. I don't want them to go. But what I will say is I always tell people when I put them on a growth plan that we will come to a fork in the road, and I will be very transparent with you when we get there. Because when we get to that fork, it will be like, yay, we are making it.
Yeah.
We're going to move away from this growth plan. You are on your own. Fly, be free, little birdie. This is great. I'm here to support you, but you are on the right path. Or we come to a clear point where it's like, this is not in your best interest. It's not in my best interest. It's not in our students' best interest. And we part ways. But I have found that when that happens, when you've done it with a respectful process, that they can see that you truly committed and tried to help them grow, they recognize that, and often they leave voluntarily. They don't leave with anger. They're not bitter. They know that they've made a good decision. You're really helping everybody make the right decision.
Makes sense. There are some great questions coming in the chat, which we'll want to go back to it. But first, David, your chapter opens up with a question, that shaped 2 years of focus groups in Santa Cruz Valley: parents, educators, students, community members. And the question that you put in front of all of them was, when a student walks across the stage of graduation, who have they become? And that's a different question than, are they ready for college, or have they enough credit they need, or they're ready for employment. So why does the framing of that question matter so much? What has changed your district once you have actually started to put that out?
Well, thank you, and very fortunate to be here. I mean, before we even started with that question, one of the things that we looked at, we've very fortunate to have a community that supports education. We are 90, like, as I mentioned, we're 15 miles from the border. 97% of our students are Hispanic, and 90% of our students come in speaking Spanish as their first language, and 90% are free and reduced. So with those demographics, people always will say, well, that's a very challenging demographic to deal with. But what I tell them, it's not. In our community, they really support education, especially K-12 education. So in 2018, take you a little bit further back, we were the National AP School District of the Year. In the same year, we were the National Cambridge School District of the Year. But what we found was, even though we had those success and our students were doing very well, and we also have a 94% graduation rate, what were we doing to really prepare our students? So that question came because our high achieving students were doing well, but that's only about 30% of our student population. So what is the rest of the 70% of our students doing? So we really wanted to focus and bring in our community, bring in our families, again, because they're very supportive of education. It's just I think a cultural thing from being a rural Hispanic population. They really value education. They value teachers. So one of the things, once teachers teach in our district, they see a difference, so they feel the support. But one of the things that we were really focused on is the agency of our students. And because they don't advocate for themselves, how do we get that to develop? And so that question, again, what do we want our students to leave with, and who do we want them to be? We want them to be effective communicators and all the things, but it's taking it beyond just the talk and really implementing it. And I say that's one of the things about our district is that we don't settle. We're pushing constantly, making our teachers, and we tell our teachers, this is not an easy place to teach, because we have high expectations, we have high standards, in the same way that they do that for our students. it's a trickle down. And kind of what I think Chris was talking about as well is we try to model that as leaders. I try to be at the campuses, try to do that. I have taught leadership classes within our district because I want to be able to model instruction as well. So there's a lot of different things that we've done as a district to really try to shape where we're going and what we're doing in the future, but also recognizing what we've done in the past. And like I said, we've been very fortunate to be successful in a lot of ways, but we want to make sure we continue to grow and push. We have our teaching, learning, and assessment office, and we just recognized that person, that leader, one of our last board meetings, because she's been very instrumental in our personalized learning, our standards-based grading movement, as well as our new strategic plan. And one of the things that was great when she went up when she was recognized, she said, "Thank you, but we're nowhere near where we need to be." And that's something that our district, kind of our mantra is that we want to be above the bar every day. So we're always trying to strive to be better in every aspect. Whether it be our food service, one of the things that we're very fortunate, we have great amenities for our students. Every student in our district eats for free. And so, and people are like, why is that important? Because we want our kids, we want to remove barriers. We want to remove any food issues. We have telehealth on our campuses. So we want to have everything that we can do to really assist our students to be.
Love that, honestly, David. Now I would love to go to round 2, which is like an open conversation. So feel free to jump in to give your comments. So in my opinion, you all guys did multiple different initiatives at your own organization, at your own level. But I would want to ask that what prevents district leaders or school leaders from doing new initiatives? Even when they want to do it, what stops them? What are the roadblocks? So I want to address that upfront.
I mean, I've been to school, so I think I think it's always everybody in some form or fashion is comfortable with the way things are, whether they're good, bad, or indifferent. There's a comfort level that comes with just doing what you're doing, right? And so when you come in as a leader or as a department chair or whatever, and you're talking about disrupting that status quo, that comfort, even if they admit that it's going to make something better, right? Because it's not going to happen tomorrow. It's not going to happen next week. It's going to take time. That's hard work, and I think that always kind of like gives people a little anxiety to think about the hard work, the time, all the things, right? And then again, going back to that thing of wanting to be perfect. When you take on something new, you're not going to be, it's going to be messy. You're going to make mistakes. And, so I think there's always a reticence, with people, just human nature, to kind of balk at, lifting something, that's going to take time, that's going to be hard, where they have to be vulnerable and admit mistakes and things like that. So I think that at a school level is an initial kind of like, for a teacher, they'll be like, oh, wait a minute, things are going well in my class. Like, why do we need to, mess things up? So I think that mentally, I think sometimes that's a little bit of a block, and then sometimes, there's money involved. And so district people like these superintendents will be like, wait a minute, Chris, we don't have the funds for that, so there, there's that goes into it as well. But, I think that mental, kind of loving the status quo and being comfortable sometimes gets in the way.
I would add to that I think the word initiative has a very negative connotation.
Yeah.
And when people hear it, what they hear is this too shall pass.
Yeah.
Like, we're going to start something. And then when
100%.
the next person has an idea, or the next leader comes in, or the next governor changes the curriculum, welcome to Texas, you're going to change. I met a superintendent. I interviewed with a superintendent once to be an associate superintendent, and he gave me a piece of advice that I thought was amazing. And that is, don't talk about initiatives. Talk about your cornerstones. What are your things that are the foundation of what you are, who you are, what you're doing?
Mhm.
And don't just keep trying new things. Like whatever it is that's new, does it fit in with who you are, what you want to be? And so I think it's, for me, we don't use the word initiatives. You know, we work with our cornerstones of who we are, and then we feed it through that filter before we try anything new. And I certainly agree with the money, you know, and the teacher that just, you can freeze a teacher in their tracks by saying, we're having a new initiative. And then everybody's like the deer in the headlights, like, oh, no. So that's part of it too.
Yeah, I would say, trust. I think both of you brought up a few things. Chris talking about failing forward, and I think that's also part of trust with your staff. Allowing them to try things and be able to fail forward, and if they and not be afraid that there's going to be some repercussions. But building that trust. Yeah, I've been very fortunate to be in the district as a superintendent for 12 years. People joke I'm kind of a unicorn in that sense that I've been here for such a long time, but I've seen us grow in different areas and been able to but what are we actually trying to do, and not just talk about things, but how can we continually improve? And so that's but what I would say is communication and trust is something that sometimes holds people back because there is no trust or there is a lack of communication. So I think both of those things are important with your team.
And I'll just add on to that, David, because that's so spot on. Because I was thinking about doing initiatives requires a mindset shift, because so many of us feel like things are being done to us and not with us. And that's why coalition building is so important. And it is hard to coalition build around things, and it takes a lot of time. And then you need to have sort of the maybe executive sponsorship for it. So there are a number of different reasons why people will just sort of allow things, like Chris said, to just sort of be maybe status quo or just kind of keep going within that. It takes a strong constitution, you know what I mean? And also a high level of self-awareness and reflective practice and relationship building, and what David said, trust. That you have to build in order to actually spark an initiative, and then have it grow and even sustain, because that's another part of it. And when things are dependent upon one leader and one person, then it just sort of spirals with the next burn and churn, of what happens a lot of times in our organizations. And so they can't just be carried by a charismatic leader. They have to be carried by the people most connected to what change you're trying to enact. So that's my thought.
Yep.
That's perfect, guys. Thank you so much for those amazing points. I'll actually want to go direct to one of the questions which audience asked. That was there a mentor or a teacher or a leader early in your life that shaped the way you now develop others? I love that question.
I'll go first again, maybe. I don't know. I think about that question in two ways. So when I was young, my grandfather definitely had a huge impact on me. He was a mayor, a small business owner. And so just being with him and seeing how he just interacted with people, considering the role that he played in the city that he was in, he was just this very, guy. He was just a person. He was the mayor, but just the way he treated people and they treated him always had an impact on me. But in the education space, becoming a leader, I would say my first assistant principal, Bill Thompson, had a huge impact on me because he was just so pragmatic in his approach. He listened to people. He listened to understand, not to respond. And that his leadership had a huge impact on me as I thought about the kind of leader I wanted to be, because I wanted to treat teachers as I was treated by Bill. And so kind of walked in his footsteps, and it's, served me well, in 27 years that I've been doing this. So I'm the baby in the room.
I may be a little bit more, maybe just 1 year, probably 26 years.
Right.
I mean, this will
All
be
right.
year 27, though. No, this is in 1999. So this year we're twins, Chris.
We are? Yeah. Yeah.
I'm going to name that while my mother was a teacher, my father was an entrepreneur. He was a barber and a beautician. I'm here in the city. And what I got was this great cross section of different people that my father did their hair. And he did a professor of biology, Dr. Millie Russell. And she became my mentor. I remember being about 8 years old and her asking me in the beauty shop what I wanted to be when I grew up. And I said, I wanted to be a doctor. And she said, do you know what it takes to be a doctor? And, years later, maybe around 11, she let me come up to the University of Washington campus. She just opened doors and sponsored opportunities. Even college, she called down to the HBCU, Clark Atlanta, that I wanted to attend, to her colleague there. And I was able to get a scholarship, an academic scholarship. And so I really feel like that my family didn't exactly know what to do to develop my talent in all the ways, but they knew that they could give me to community. And I appreciate how community, came around and supported me and continue, I believe, to support me, through some of these endeavors that I'm even working with right now. And so I don't want to estimate the power of community, and many people of color don't have the type of social networks, or people who live in poverty or in rural contexts don't have sort of the social networks to give them the guide wires and the opportunities to get to places. And that's why community is so important, because it serves as a village. It serves as a network to help move talent to where it needs to be. And I'm super grateful for Dr. Millie Russell. God rest her soul. Yep.
Well, I would say, first of all, I started out with this trifecta of women as a child. My mother, my aunt, my grandmother, who just were like telling me I could do anything, which for good or bad or ugly, I believed them. But when I experienced in my professional world, there were two gentlemen, both at the same campus, Gerardo Marquez and Robert Harris. And in two different ways, they influenced me. One, Marquez would always say, who's the next man up? Like, he was always like, I'm going to lose you at some point. Like, you have aspirations. I can see it. Like, who's going to replace you? Who are you training? Who are you coaching? And he just put that mentality in my mind that we should always be growing someone else. We should always be paying it forward. We should always be looking to have somebody take our seat. And then Robert Harris told me something that he said, well, he's a 6'3" tall, 6'3" man. And he's like, well, I hate to tell you this, Leslie, but you don't pass the eye test. And what he meant by the eye test is you're a little tiny woman, and people are going to make assumptions right from the jump when they look at you. But what that instilled in me is that, first of all, I should not be using the eye test on anybody else. Nobody should have to pass the eye test. And that meant that I was really going to need to look at who I could mentor, because they were mentoring me. And he wasn't saying that to be mean. What he was saying was, you're going to have to come at this in a different way. And he was really coaching me. And I appreciated that, because instead of getting angry or bitter, or why am I not getting the job? Why are they not listening to me? It was like, just, you need to approach it in a different way. And I really appreciated that he was so transparent with me in a loving way and a coaching way to help me grow.
My father, who was an educator as well, he was an educator for 44 years, was a teacher, coach, then principal. Wow. Early in my life, I was like, there's no way I want to follow in his footsteps. But as I got older and understood what he was really doing, his mantra was always the more you serve, the more you receive. And so he was always trying to make other people better. And so that is something that I've always, the way he treated the custodian all the way to the principal, just watching him through his career, that they were always telling people, no one works for me as a superintendent, everybody works with me. And so I've always tried to take that, what I learned from him, as a mentor, and one of the things that, one of my favorite stories about my father is, I had got the first brand new pair of Nike shoes because he was a coach and he got a great deal. And one of my classmates, was acting up because he was in poverty and had no shoes. So my dad took my shoes away, gave them to the student, and I was mad at the time, but what it did for that, it changed that student's life, because it was a conversation with him and my dad of, I'm going to give you these shoes, but I need you to be, work hard and earn these shoes. And so it was, and I always joke, it's not about did for that student and transform that student's life. And those are just things that I learned from him of being in service. And so I've always tried to just be in service.
Those are some fantastic stories, and I'm so happy about those mentors. So a big shout out for them, because what they did has influenced to such a big level, to such a big number of students, that it's sometimes unfathomable. This impact can drive in so many different directions. But I have a very interesting question, which I just read, that sometimes a classroom is as good as the teacher. The onus of a quality school lies majority still on the teachers, and a lot of discussion happens, that in other sectors of industries, like insurance, or let's say healthcare, or let's say even tourism, they try to create those systems which can put the benchmark irrespective of the person. Of course, a great person will thrive and perform even better with great systems. But then in a school setup, it's still a lot of bespoke, and it depends largely on the teachers. So I would love to know and understand your perspective, how you think a school system can try to make the experience at a certain benchmark, so that it's not solely dependent on the teacher's mood or teacher's situation at that particular time. No offense, I know all teachers put a lot of hard work, but you understand my question,
Yeah. I mean, I think that's hard. I mean, there is no perfect system at the end of the day, and I mean, to speak about that individual in that room,
Yeah.
Could wreck something because they're having a bad day, or they're just not a nice person, or whatever, and they're not going to execute that system well ultimately. Like, I could put in, and David and Leslie could put in great systems that anyone could execute, really, right? But again, somebody may decide they're not going to execute on this particular day or this particular week, and then all of a sudden the wheels fall off for that group of kids because the execution wasn't there. So short of plugging kids in, right, and then the system is going to be perfect because you don't have to worry about this person. It's just the platform or whatever that's delivering the education, which is awful to think about, but that's really the only way to take out that unknown, which is this human being that mood, skill. I mean, Leslie talked about, and I believe as a leader, I tell my people all the time, like, I don't want to keep hiring people every year. Like, if I have no one leave, that'd be great because I can just keep developing the same 160 people in my building. That's unrealistic. I'm always going to have new people, but it's you've got to develop who's in your building. You've got to have them supported. They've got to feel loved, and you've got their back so that they go into that room and execute that system you're talking about with fidelity and with skill and with love and support for those kids, is what I would say.
Okay. So you still don't see any system which can work in that way?
No, not in education. There's no way. Not with kids. I don't think so.
Okay.
I was going to say, I agree with Chris. I don't think there is. I mean, we all have systems that we use and expectations and standards. but we're not producing widgets, and I think that's the sometimes the mentality, and we're not in an assembly line, so I think that there is, again, like with us, personalized learning, standardized grading, we want to push students to be successful. We want teachers to be successful. And as Leslie said, having teachers grow. I mean, that's the important piece of that as well, and trying to retain teachers. And so I think it's we all have systems, but it's impossible, I believe, to just make it, again, that assembly line where everybody's going to come out the same. And because students are in different areas, teachers are in different areas. And that's one of the hardest things that I think about education is it's so diverse, not only from demographics, but also just ability to learn, so there you have to try to meet students where they're at and try to grow them. You have to meet teachers where they're at and try to grow them. And you do have systems in place to help with that, but there's something that fits everybody.
Yeah.
I agree 100% that there is not one. It's kind of like, think about dieting, right? Like some people like the Atkins diet, some people do intermittent fasting, and it, it works for some, it doesn't work for others. What I find is the key factor is what can you have fidelity with? If you can't follow through consistently, then the system, I don't care how good the system is designed, it's not going to work. So it's about, like David was saying, like teachers are different, cultures are different. Like we have to align ourselves with the need, and then we have to pick the system that fits the need, and then we have to be consistent. That's a conversation that I am having again with my elementary team right now. It's like you have systems, but I don't see the follow through. You start something and then you don't finish it. And so it's not going to work. As long as that's your cycle, it's not going to work. So there is no magic, silver bullet, but there are lots of things that work. It's in finding the thing that works for you and for that teacher and for that classroom, that culture. It's very individualized.
Yeah. That all those points really make sense. But it's a constant debate, of the system versus teachers. And thank you so much for giving your input on that. I will take another question in the chat. Any question that you guys read that you want to pick up from the chat? Otherwise, you can see the chat on the right.
Yeah.
Oh, right. Okay. I was looking at the cloud.
Let me look.
Shall I pick one?
Yeah, go ahead.
So how do you create systems that identify leadership potential in people who may not initially see it in themselves? Love that.
I can answer that one. I think the first is representation. You can't be what you can't see. And so I know that it's been important for me to be the first in many cases. Sometimes I'd end up being the first Black teacher that a student, ever had, like particularly in middle school. I taught in middle school. The first Black principal of the pre-K through 8 school that I was the principal of. The first Black female superintendent of St. Louis Public Schools. And I know that when youth had a chance to see me, it unlocked opportunities for them. In the same way as me leaving Seattle Erin, although I had a beautifully supportive representative community that I felt tight-knit and close to, me having the opportunity to attend an HBCU, it opened up my aperture around who I majored in chemistry and mathematics. And so I had an opportunity to meet scientists who looked like me, women who were scientists. And so representation matters very much. I also find that communities of color, that they may not have the mentorship and sponsorship, in some of the roles that they're in, particularly if they're in support roles. And so I think it's very important for all people to sort of recognize that. and to make sure that they're tapping them in and finding ways for them to be able to see themselves beyond what they currently see. A lot of times we do this for young people and youth, but we forget this about the adults that we're entrusted with, in the systems that we lead in and that we have a chance to serve. And part of that service is for the adults that we're entrusted to serve as well. And so I think that that's a very important attribute to have, and something that all people need to carry, that diversity and representation matters very much, and it's something that we have to continue to value.
Lovely.
Yep.
Lovely. Anybody
And
else?
I would say, the thing I talk a lot about is the idea of the bench. Is having people and knowing people that, for me, as a principal, that I might want to work with, as assistant principals for me, or administrative assistants, or whatever the case may be. And so I'm always looking for those people. But more importantly, I'm asking others to do the same thing. My department chairs, even teachers that they'd want to work with, when we have to replace someone, when we've got to interview, when we've got to, replenish our staff, I like to know ahead of time who that person might be. I don't want to wait. I don't want to react. I want to be proactive. And so I'm always engaged in that. And I encourage others to do the same. So that's how we build leadership here. I think Leslie talked about, you never know what tomorrow brings. Who's going, if you win the lottery or something awesome happens and you decide to walk out the door, like, who's going to lead the social studies department when that occurs, right? We've got to know that now, not when it occurs or if it occurs. Like, we can't be left in the lurch, and so we've always got to be developing people and pouring into people, so that they kind of know that that's seen in them. A lot of teachers don't realize that kind of stuff unless they're kind of poked or prodded, and it's our job to do that, I think.
Yeah,
Great.
and that's similar to the bench for us as well. In our district, every a week after, that seems a little rough, but we bring our new administrators back to our leadership academy. And we reflect on the year. So each site, we provide some training with about leadership, and so we're trying to develop that bench. But one of the things that we're very proud of in our district is currently all of our principals are graduates from our high school, which is was really incredible thing what happened for us. That they went to our high school, went away, came back as teachers, moved up the system in our district. So it was a great thing to have happen for us.
Perfect.
I believe in delegation as empowerment. If you give people, and it's a win-win, right? Because
Yeah.
I find somebody who I think could be good at doing this, at organizing this program or taking on this little lead. I stay with them. I hold their hand in the beginning. I set up clear expectations, and then they get the bug, because really, moving up is about getting the bug that you're like, wow, I can do this. And a lot of people, they don't necessarily believe in themselves, or, they're unsure. They maybe have a little bit of imposter syndrome, but when you give them that guided thing and they take it and they run with it, and then you praise them, first of all, you didn't have to do the work. And second of all, they got that bug that they need to want to do it, because you want people to want to do it.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. Love all these inputs, guys. It's so important to always create the next level of leadership. I think that's one of the jobs of being a leader, to make sure the ball is always rolling. So thank you so much for your inputs. Guys, go ahead, read the book. I think there are a lot of interesting, more in-depth stories. You can download the book from this link, from this QR code, and that on the page. Plus, there will be a link in the chat as well. So thank you so much for giving us time. And same time on May 21st, we'll have the third book tour event with the next set of authors. And till then, thank you so much. Have a great day. And thank you again, guys, for giving out time today.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.